Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for that 30, 45 second some odd delay. I'm not too sure why my OBS was taking its sweet time to connect to my YouTube, but here we are. It is Friday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, May 17th now. We are rapidly getting closer and closer to the calendar start date of the hurricane season, and we have a decent amount to talk about. Nothing too substantial, but I had mentioned on Wednesday, if you guys tuned in for our live stream, our Tropical Update Wednesday morning, same time, same place, that things could change, and we might actually have a couple things to mention, and we do, but, truthfully, nothing pressing. Let's get that out of the way. Good morning, Super Charas, CWTDF. Thank you very much for joining us. Today is officially May 17th. It is already the 17th. We are in that downward descent. We started up May, and we were hopping on the roller coaster of the 31 days of May, your roller coaster theme park of choice, and now we have hit that downward descent. We have about 14 more days, I believe, until the hurricane season officially kicks off. We have three areas of note that we're going to discuss this morning alongside the severe weather event that's been occurring over the deep south and the southeast that's slowly but surely working its way into the state of Florida. Once again, we have some pretty intense activity off of our west coastline near the Big Bend area just south of Apalachicola, Panama City, that thankfully just barely dodged the Panhandle, the Tallahassee area, because Tallahassee got it real bad not too long ago. And so, thankfully, you could see on this satellite image, we're using tropical tidbits, the good old tidbits this morning. We're not looking at our other Goes East satellite. We'll transition over there maybe, but we shall see. Anyways, Alex Baller, 75. Nazario, I think Eastern Pacific might fail on the system. The dry air seems to be too much right now. We'll take a look at that in a second. As a matter of fact, let's go over to our water vapor right now and see, because I don't know about the dry air out in front of one of them. I mean, it does look like this one is more organized than the one behind it. We do have two systems out there. Yesterday afternoon, we had a new disturbance highlighted for a 2020 shot of development. I believe they have upped that just a little bit. A very impressive feature on the satellite, at least, given the time of year. And the secondary system is slowly trying to get itself together. And for those of you who may be wondering, what am I looking at outside of these just shades of white and these pop-off, colorful-looking blobs of moisture out there on the satellite, we're looking at Disturbance 1 and newly formed Disturbance 2, and Disturbance 2 looks fairly impressive for what it is. Take that and do with it as you please. When I say impressive, I don't necessarily mean tropical storm, but given the fact that it developed over the span of 24 to 36 hours, it has that textbook look to it, and we'll zoom in here in a moment. The Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, despite our convective activity that's going on over the southeast quadrant of the U.S., is fairly quiet. We still have dry air in place. Nice area of anticyclonic curvature you can see in the upper levels right over Central America. Could that be a gyre trying to take place? I'm not so sure really just yet, but it's trying. We're definitely seeing an influx of moisture, and one area that I want us to watch very closely is going to be northern South America, headed up towards Jamaica, Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, because I'll tell you the truth, we're seeing Vince all over again. For my long-term followers, we're going to start jumping on the bandwagon, and folks may fall into the trap of estimating that good old tropical storm Vince, in this case Alberto, may try to form. And I'm here to tell you that even though it looks exciting, and I know we're ready for preseason, hurricane season activity, it's not quite what you think. And we'll talk you through the science and the dynamics behind it here in a second. This is National Hurricane Center's homepage, and I'm not introducing it because you guys aren't familiar with it. I know we're very familiar with the Hurricane Center's homepage. Nothing out there in the Atlantic Basin, nothing for the next 48 hours, nothing for the next 7 days. If we switch over to the Eastern Pacific, we have our two areas of mention. The disturbance here, disturbance number 1, given a 30% chance of development over the next 48 hours, as well as the next 7 days. And then this puppy here has dropped confidence in terms of formation, and what we could be seeing is a little bit of a balance of powers, if you will. I'm not going to say Fujiwara. We got a little carried away with that terminology at the end of last hurricane season. I don't think these features are impressive enough to start to really get that sort of a localized influence on one of the, like we saw with Philippe and Rena. Those were two organized low-pressure cyclones, and in this case, we just don't have enough intensification or localized I guess you can call strength or energy associated with each individual disturbance that we're going to see that happen. I think it's just outflow from one or the other in close proximity to the opposite is acting as a inhibiting mechanism and creating a little bit of that downward forcing. Because even though across the large scale we have upward vertical motion, hot water, 30 to 31 degrees Celsius water underneath these lows, they're moving at a fairly slow rate, so stacking upward in the atmosphere is not going to be a big issue. Our shear is to the north. However, when you think about it, with all that exchange of heat with each of these individual systems trying to create that upward vertical motion in their center to deepen the low pressure. Let me know if I've lost you, by the way. I know I'm rattling off a bunch of stuff. All that upward vertical motion condensed or consolidated to where the low pressure is trying to organize further is going to create a little bit of outflow. What goes up always has to come down, and so what I think is happening is we might be seeing a bit of a smothering effect, almost like a localized chimney to a downward effect with this disturbance off to the east. So we'll see. We'll have to see what happens. They could merge for all intents and purposes. They could be absorbed and become one. Models are still extremely wishy-washy in terms of what's going to happen out here. And if we switch on over to the weather nerds, we haven't used weather nerds in a little bit of time. You can see that especially our westward disturbance has that wonderful look to it. You can see a little bit of that anticyclonic outflow up in the upper levels above that center of circulation, and you can see a somewhat condensated or I condensed two words, consolidated center of low pressure in that system. This is our secondary system, not looking too good. Almost looks like just a boiling pot of convective water, if you will. We can't really find a discernible vortex with it. Maybe if we switched over to windy.com and looked at the streamlines, we might be able to identify some sort of a low pressure beginning to form. It almost looks like there's something off to its east, as a matter of fact, trying to slowly spin up. I'm seeing a little bit of a cyclonic signature in our clouds down in the lowest levels of the atmosphere back over here. Not saying that's going to be a new system, but for all we know, this could be it trying to reorganize and maybe back build off towards the east a little bit. As a matter of fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and go on over to windy.com and see exactly what we see, especially while folks are still joining us. All right. So disturbance number one, we have a little bit of a cyclonic spin to it right there. You can see a low pressure center right there. Not a whole lot off towards the west. In fact, it's very interesting to see that the wind flow is actually going back up through the Tehuantepec Canyon right in through here. Typically, whenever we watch for fronts moving down south through Mexico and Central America, you see the winds funneling down into the eastern Pacific. In this case, you can see them going back up towards the north, which is very cool, very impressive. It looks like there might be something trying to do a little bit of something out and through here. If we ascend the atmosphere just a little bit, we might be able to see it. Let's go up in altitude. This is the surface. Let's go to 925. Not too much at 925. Can still see our westernmost disturbance out there. What about 850? Nothing really at 850. 850, we do have some pretty decent consolidation in that westward system. So we'll see. To be determined. It actually looks like we might have a little bit of wind shear just out in front of it. Some pretty decent trade winds coming in out of the northwest, eventually transitioning to the northeast. So if it continues to wander in that direction, that might hurt its vertical stack. So we shall see. In fact, let's go up just a little bit higher. Let's go to 700, see what the winds do. Oh yeah, lots of really good mid-level winds out in front of it. So that could also hamper any kind of additional organization. So this thing might only have another day or two to hang out with us. So get your fill now for those of you who have been waiting for some kind of a tropical disturbance or tropical anything for that matter to pop off. Get your fill of it now. Ooh, cyclone, vorticity, disturbance, yellow X, because it doesn't seem like it's going to hang out for too long. Let's go on over to the GFS and let's take a look at the Eastern Pacific. I know we're doing this a little backwards today, but since we have a couple of active systems out there, figure may as well dive into that first. The GFS has been all sorts of wonky with this. So as you can see, going through the 6Z run, there is nothing out there. Nothing at all whatsoever, which is very strange because if you fast or rewind to 12 Zulu yesterday and go back to the beginning of the run, we go all the way up to major hurricane status. So it goes to show I don't know. Models are still out to lunch in terms of tropical development, unfortunately. The European model has not been doing very well. The Icon obviously didn't do very well. The Canadian model isn't doing too well. So for preseason activity, I guess you could say right on cue activity in the Eastern Pacific, we're not really seeing a heck of a lot of really good consistency and reliability in all our models across the spectrum. If you go to 0Z, nothing, completely nothing, nada, we've lost it. So we've been going very, very heavily back and forth. We come on over to the Euro and take a look at the Eastern Pacific as well. Nothing, and there has been nothing. Very weak spin. You could see that one weak spin right through here that very, very slowly trudges off towards the west and then eventually washes out once it hits all that wind shear. And I do believe that wind shear is because of the gradient of high pressure. You can see off the chart here to our upper left-hand corner. It's off the chart. You can see a little bit of barotropicness. There's a thickness line that's entirely closed off, so it could be a bit of an upper-level cold pocket that's also creating some temperature discontinuity. Intense heating down here, cooler air right there, so that's probably why we're getting that channeling of strong winds out of the north and then northeast, cutting back across in a easterly fashion towards the equatorial Pacific. If we move on to our Canadian model and head on over to the Eastern Pacific, much of the same. We're not seeing much in the way of development. Doesn't give it a big vote of confidence. I think now we're finally getting into the true representation of what's going to happen out here. We had a little bit of fun tracking something in the mid to long range, and now it's just not going to execute. It's not going to consolidate. The same thing with the Icon. This is finally a little bit more consistency than we've seen between our models. All of them are screaming the same thing in our face that, nothing's going to happen. You can see maybe a small window of future development as we get into early next week, but outside of that, things are going to calm down again. And then with that being said, let's go over to the Western Atlantic, to the Caribbean, and take a look at a couple things. I'm not too sure the 0Z Icon. Oh yeah, the Icon is catching it. This bad boy right here, for sure. Oh, that's fine. You can be focused on that. I don't really think anything's going to happen. We'll see. We don't really have a big threat for severe down here right now. Let me see. We have winds pushing in towards Spring Hill and Homosassa, 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that's probably going to fizzle out once it gets into the peninsula like it always has, like clockwork. We don't have very many people in here on the stream today. I've noticed that we're suddenly tapering off. I think it's because people think that we're hyping even though we're not really doing any sort of mess like that. So this is something that's been on a few of our radars for a couple of days now, and so far we haven't seen a huge influx in the videos mentioning tropical. And to tell you the truth, I am going to jump in their comments section immediately if I start seeing tropical this, tropical that, because the only thing tropical about this is the fact that it's coming out of the tropics. That's it. That's the only thing. Period. If we switch over to the GFS, we're once again getting signals of remnant vents from way back in 2023. If you look, you go through the loop, look at that. A little bit of a low pressure system spinning up right there. Blam. And then it disappears. I'm here to tell you that that's probably going to be another instance of PTC, if you guys remember PTC 22, very heavily sheared environment. We have an upper tropospheric trough, a tut that's going to be coming through. And in fact, you can flagrantly see it in our thickness pattern here, right through the thickness lines here. If you look, you can see that there is a trough digging in the upper levels. We don't even need to go to the upper levels to identify it. You can just take a look at how our thickness lines are running in all sorts of weird fashion. So you can imagine that we still have a ridge building in over Mexico, the southern United States, that's going to keep us very hot, and an upper tropospheric trough that's going to be moving out into the western Atlantic, scraping across Cuba, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. So what we're seeing is that difluent flow. Essentially what we're seeing is what produces our severe weather in the United States down in the Caribbean. So, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of impressive. It's Florida. I don't know if it's going to make it into Central Florida. We shall see. It'll probably be light rain or something like that by the time it makes it here. If we move over to the upper levels, we'll start with our 500 millibar anomaly. And the anomaly, just as I posted on my TikTok yesterday, does a fantastic job of highlighting it. So you can see ridging has built in over the Caribbean. We have an even stronger ridge that's dominating Mexico in the southern plains. But then notice that there is a bit of troughing. I shouldn't even say a bit. There is some pretty substantial troughing out across the Caribbean. And what that's going to do is create a difference in our environmental flow. We've had quite a bit of consistently easterly flow over northern South America, Central America, and the rest of the Caribbean Sea for all intents and purposes. And as this scrapes through the northernmost portions of the Caribbean Sea, the western Atlantic, it's going to create a nice area of wind shear. So development is off the table. If you switch back over here, absolutely no shot. Look at this. Boom. No way. No way. So there's not going to be very much development. This is a trademark tropical upper tropospheric trough. You can see it coming in from the mid-Atlantic, the northeast United States, and extending all the way down with the axes, or the base of the axes, all the way through Honduras and Nicaragua. So this is not going to create anything tropical. And as we all know, one of the more simpler effects of a trough is divergence aloft ahead of the trough, right here. And notice how that lines up spectacularly with where we're seeing all that potential development. If we come over to our 200 millibar wind, you can see even better. There's your trough. You can see that neutral point in the winds, or the calming of the winds, right in the centermost axes of that long wave trough, and a really good jet max just out ahead of it. So that's what's going to help to develop our jet-supported low. It's going to be another case of not only Vince, but Ophelia, just like we saw last hurricane season. And you can see as it lifts towards the north, it gets picked back up in our upper-level flow. Trough kind of marinates down there for a while, and then finally we kick that out and we go back to more of a zonal pattern across the area. This is also why I and a number of other sources out there, reliable sources, have been saying as we get into June, we might just see an opening window, not necessarily right as we transition to June, but as we move into the first and second week of June. Because notice here, without even moving back over to our shear anomaly, our jet has lifted to the north. We still have quite a bit of jet stream activity over the Gulf coastline through Florida, especially through the mid-Atlantic coast. But as we've taken on this zonal flow, we have really good anticyclonic curvature across the eastern, the central, and southern Caribbean. And I'm willing to bet if we switch over to our shear anomaly, there's probably nothing down there. Yep, see, so our wind shear is starting to back off. Slowly but surely. Slowly. So let's not get too excited right now, but eventually, as we go through time, we're going to start to see our wind shear back off. If you want even further confirmation, we can go over to the EPS, the 0Z European ensembles, and as you can see, our shear is slowly but surely going to start to lift towards the north. So the Caribbean, the southern Caribbean, is going to slowly become more favorable of an environment. And this is only the beginning. Remember, this is only June 1st. This is as we begin the hurricane season. So time will tell. We're still a little too far away to get that excited or uppity about what could possibly be coming. The main area of concern is going to be the MDR and into the southern and eastern Caribbean. We'll have to monitor and exactly see what spins up out of that. Well, not necessarily spins up, but tries to wander in. If we move over to our probabilities and move over to Thursday, our latest information, you notice that as we wander our way into June, we start getting even greater signals that there could be some potential development in that same general area as well as our MDR. Now, take this with a grain of salt. Let me move the screen over a little bit so you can see, and I'll move my head out of the way. Whoops. Move my head out of the way so you guys can see the big picture. This here, I would not get too fixated on that. I would not go extremely crazy or get very attached to that and take it with a load of confidence that there is the potential for development. This is more or less signaling we will start to have our easterly waves, our tropical waves, moving through the ITCZ. Down here and up along the southeast and eastern coastline is where we are a little bit more susceptible to seeing something homegrown, as we like to call it. So we'll see what happens. Right now, it looks like the extended forecast is still more or less highlighting the same areas, and that's to be expected. This is typically where we see it. If we move over to our tropical storm probabilities, zilch. So Like I said, there's still opportunity for something to try to stew, but right now we're still very low confidence, very low confidence. If we switch to our latest tropical genesis model and we go through towards the back end of May, notice even on here, we're starting to see little indications that the Southern Caribbean could become a bit more favorable. I would also take this with a rather small amount of faith or confidence because, again, I do think this is more or less hinting or whispering at the vorticity that could try to sneak its way out of South America off of that equatorial monsoonal trough, ITCZ on either side, either ocean, whichever one you want to look at, and so on. Something might try to get up there and consolidate. If we move on over to our ensembles, the cyclone probabilities, we're really not seeing a whole lot of anything out there in the Caribbean. We scroll all the way towards the back end of the loop, and we've lost all confidence in the Eastern Pacific and all confidence in the Caribbean. The MDR is dry. Same thing with the GFS ensembles, although I know we're going to get a little bit of excitement in our spaghetti plots as you go towards the middle to latter half because of what could possibly be trying to sneak its way out of the Caribbean. Again, just based on the upper level dynamics, I would not get too hungry or excited about that, truthfully. And if you see any other sources blasting it out, please put them back in their lane and just make sure that they're not advertising something that is not really going to happen. Are we going to see heavy rainfall? Probably. We're in the diffluent exit region of a jet stream and a trough in the upper levels. So are we going to see a potential for very heavy rainfall? 110%. Are we going to see a potential for tropical cyclone development? Probably not. We're just not in a favorable environment. As we all know, the biggest difference between these jet-supported lows and our tropical lows is where they originate. You want something tropical to originate in the low to mid levels and then stack up to the upper levels. Baroclinic or jet-supported systems, whether it be your subtropical jet, polar front jet, Arctic jet, whatever jet you want to put on the table, they start in the upper levels and stack down towards the surface, and they have a gradient with them. So that's why I'm really not giving this a huge vote of confidence. I really, really hope National Hurricane Center does not stamp it. They did that a few times last year, and that's my biggest concern because the moment they stamp it, they're going to unleash the floodgates, and every single tropical subject matter expert is going to start calling Alberto, again, just like they did last year. We come on over to the GEPS, our latest 0Z May 17th ensembles for the Canadian model. And even the Canadian model's losing some faith and confidence we're going to get anything out of the East Pacific, and nothing is anticipated to organize out there across our Atlantic basin at all. Even well into June, there is zero confidence from the Canadian model that anything is going to organize. So we shall see. High pressure is still dominant out there over the central Atlantic. The Azores as well as Bermuda are smothered by high pressure. So, in all intents and purposes, we are getting lucky right now, and that's how we should consider it. Instead of, right now, very low viewage, channels quieting down again because the excitement of tropical season has died again. Will we see an uptick? Probably when stuff happens, but by then it's going to be too late. We should be considering ourselves lucky almost because we have a very dominant 1030 high, 1031 high pressure out there over the central Atlantic. So if anything was forming, it's coming straight at us. And that's not fear-mongering, that's not hyping, that's just looking at the overall pattern. We have a trough here, we have very dominant high-pressure subtropical ridging, or I should just say ridging altogether, over the greater Atlantic basin. So anything that forms in the MDR in the Caribbean is coming straight for you. So we're lucky right now. We should honestly be praising that we're quiet right now and nothing is coming, because if it was, you're getting hit. I can say that with 3,000% confidence, and I don't even need a model or anything else to look at. Just at the overall steering pattern out there, even with that trough coming through, if that trough wasn't there, you're going to get smacked by a tropical cyclone, no cap, as the little ones would say nowadays. Now, I have not looked at the CFS recently, to tell you the truth, so this is going to be interesting. I've honestly stopped looking at this stuff because there just hasn't been any signals of development. There goes our little wave that the GFS has been seeing. The CFS is also seeing it as well, coming out of the Caribbean and getting picked up by our high pressure out there in the Atlantic. Could be a rain threat for Bermuda. So let's see what the CFS is thinking. So CFS is once they see, like I said, CFS is generating another storm, and look at that. We have a Cayman Island, Western Cuba, Southern Florida impact. I'm telling you, if anything does form, it's coming for us. No period. No ifs, ands, or buts. So the CFS is thinking as we wander into the early periphery of June, we're really going to start to see our moisture increase. We could see the potential for some homegrown systems. Look at that again, another little Florida landfall right in through there. But even the CFS doesn't look all that promising. And this is why I've been not giving it the time of day. The CFS is still trying to spit out very weak and sloppy systems out there, but, not much. There really isn't much out there. It's almost disappointing because a lot of folks were voting for preseason activity. This could spin up, that could spin up, and it almost looks like that's not going to happen. It almost looks like we're going to be playing the waiting game until sometime in June. So truthfully, if we don't have very many people watching, if we don't have many people tuning in or subscribing, that's okay, because there really isn't much to worry about. When there is, I have a bad feeling it's going to happen fast, but to be determined, as always. Let's just go ahead and we'll move forward in time. There really isn't much out there to discuss. There's a tropical cyclone out there off of Africa. That's pretty interesting. And then probabilities have dropped in the Eastern Pacific according to our NOAA product here over the next 48 hours. That goes without saying. Ocean heat content, on the other hand, has definitely been going off the charts. If you look, I know we don't fixate too much on our 20-degree isotherm, but this right here is a signal that we're getting hot out there. We are really starting to get hot out there. This is not your 26-degree isotherm, what you would need to be upwelled to continue to support tropical genesis, but the fact that our 20-degree isotherm is beyond that 250-meter threshold at this point goes without saying. As this warms and we exceed the threshold, what's going to end up happening is we're going to start getting into the 23s, and the 26-degree Charlie is going to go up. Is going to start to go up. If we go back and take a look, how do I scale? Here we go. If we take a look, our ocean heat content is very quickly getting its act together. We're starting to see a lot more of the reds right near Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, the Western MDR, and the Eastern Caribbean. Again, I think this is going to be our main source region. Are we going to have a number of Cape Verde systems? Yeah. But I do think that a lot of our really intense activity is going to come from in here. I really do. And that's where my number one area of development I'm going to be watching for as we move each month through the hurricane season, without a doubt. And then here's our latest look at our ENSO and our overall anomalies. El Nino, if you could even call it that, we're still in a neutral / very minuscule warm neutral, but El Nino has come and gone. El Nino is it's quiet at this point. The 1 and 2 is into La Nina territory. In fact, 1 and 2 is technically into moderate La Nina already. The 3 is into a weak La Nina. The 3 and 4, which is our main ENSO region, the identifier, the signature for what happens and what kind of influence the ENSO region has on our weather, is at that neutral point, and the 4 is being very stubborn. It is slowly coming down. We finally saw it drop below 7 for a long time from April. Actually, honestly, for most of its lifetime since beginning of February, it's been right between 0.7, 0.8, and we're finally down to 0.6. And if you're rounding down in this case. So it'd be about 0.6, 0.65 if you want to consider it that. So our ENSO 4 is finally starting to come down. And if you look at our overall anomalies, it's staring you in the face. We definitely have lost El Nino. El Nino is gone. Our Atlantic Meridional mode is really kicking in. You're seeing the waters to the south of Africa that's going to help to produce that Saharan heat low and create a little bit more of that Saharan dust as we get into June is really starting to amp up the temperature discontinuity just off the southern coast of Africa there in comparison to what northern and western Africa is looking at. So we're probably going to see some more dust outbreaks very soon. And yeah, that's all she wrote. Very low-end chat tonight. Wow, I feel like I've messed with the algorithm or I've just been slacking. I don't know how. We've been doing it pretty well, but oh well, very low-end chat today. Very quiet chat. Like I said, I think people are going to start coming back around. Maybe I could have gotten a better turnout today if we hyped something, but I'm not going to do that because it's not worth it. There's not much to talk about. So that's pretty much it. I think I had a question in here. Where did it go? Let's see. Where did that one question go? Oh, it hasn't even been very far. Can you explain the different jet streams? Absolutely, Brian, if you're still there in the chat. So our main jet stream is going to be the polar front jet. The polar front jet is more so temperature induced. You have obviously your cold air up towards the poles, as the name implies, and then you have your very warm equatorial tropical air. And as the two get closer together, that's what creates that stream of wind with a little bit of what's called conservation of angular momentum, which is the Earth's curvature, the spherical nature of the globe, and its rotation, and the tilt that the Earth has throughout the calendar year, just in its axes, is what creates the jet stream swooping around the northern hemisphere, and we have jets in the southern hemisphere as well. Our subtropical jet, much lower in terms of temperature discontinuity. Typically, our subtropical jet is not going to have much in the way of troughing. It's more so going to be a lot more of that subtropical ridging, just like what we saw with El Nino pretty much throughout the winter time, much of the spring, now starting to die off as we go through summer, because a lot more of it is physics driven. Since you're right along the equator, you're feeling the effects of Coriolis a little bit more so, and you're also feeling the Earth's rotation that much more because you're at the equator portion of it, between the Tropic of Cancer, I believe it is, to the north, and the equator down to its south. Right in through there is where your gradient of winds are going to be. Not nearly as strong as the polar front jet, but can it produce lows? Can you get subtropical fronts? Yeah, they're very weak. And then some folks would speculate, I'm not seeing it brought up as much anymore, but you have the Arctic jet that also comes down predominantly during the winter time, obviously when your coldest weather or your coldest air is in place and it butts up against the cooler/warmer air relative to its jet stream axes down over the United States, over the mid-latitudes, we'll say. And those are going to be your three primary jets. We have low-level jets, we have our African easterly jet, we have our upper tropospheric tropical jet out there over in Africa, India, etc. There's a lot of other jets out there, but they're more localized in scale, whereas the jet stream, like the polar front, is, I'm scared to say continuous, because I know some people will argue that there are breaks in it, and there are splits in it, and there are maxes in it, but it is technically, in a perfect world, continuous around the northern hemisphere. So yeah. PM, you did not just say that. Earth doesn't move? You're kidding right now, right? Yeah, I really hope that's a troll comment, because if Earth doesn't move, we are screwed. If Earth doesn't move, then prepare for 360 days of light wherever you are. Earth definitely does move. It moves in a variety of ways, in a number of ways, and that influences our weather pattern. Yes, weather systems, as the name implies, they move as well because of the different influences not only brought on by Earth's own dynamic movement, but the physics that are driven by our temperature gradients, our wind flow. I mean, all of the wind flow on the planet is more or less temperature and pressure driven, and without temperature, you're not going to have pressure differences. Without pressure differences, you're not going to have winds. Without temperature differences, you're not going to have winds, and that's what creates our large planetary steering currents like the jet, and then it just trickles down from there. But yes, the Earth does move. Earth does move, and Earth plays a big role. Its rotation, its axes, etc., definitely creates the phenomena that we see on a day-to-day. If the Earth didn't move, we would never have day, night, etc. That's just my opinion. Now we're wandering into a totally different conversation away. I mean, you could argue that the Earth's tilt and the movement in its orbit does, in fact, create the tropical season. That's real science right there. The only reason that the tropical season is from X to Y is because the Earth's tilt in relation to the sun angle with which it's orbiting around the sun 365 days out of the year is what puts the sun's direct sunlight or its rays right at that favorable spot to move our ITCZ up, to warm the Atlantic, to warm certain parts of the Earth. That creates our tropical activity. I know there's a lot more science-y jargon to it, but I'm not trying to spit the science out. I'm just, making a case here and spitballing. All right, now we're getting out there. This is not what I wanted. We're really going into another planet, no pun intended, right now. So we're going to go ahead and end the live stream. We really don't have a whole lot to talk about in Tropics Land just yet. We got to give it a little more time. We got to get our MJO back in position. The MJO has also been kind of latent in its activity. We're still waiting for a bit of an enhanced phase from that, a more enhanced positive phase. And we're going to see what happens, but in terms of overall activity, I'm not giving the Atlantic Basin a big vote of confidence until sometime in June. And the main reason why, we'll come back over here and we'll go to the global perspective. And I know this is the GFS ensembles, but they're all pretty much echoing in agreement. If you look, we're just not in a very favorable setup right now. The MJO was in a more neutral phase before it finally got into its phases, I guess you could call it 5, 6, 7, and 8, out over the Pacific. And now that it's far enough away from India, the Indian Ocean, and Africa, we're just getting pummeled by that downward forcing across the Atlantic. So it's going to be very quiet. We're not going to... Yeah, you could see all the way into June, we're not going to start to see it really reestablish itself and rotate back over to its original starting position. Phases 1, and then 2, 3, and 4 is where we start to see a little bit more of those favorable upward vertical velocities out over the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico. Could get that gyre to finally fire up. But truthfully, folks, I almost feel bad. There really isn't much to talk about. It's more or less just ranting and raving about the same thing. Even on our European ensembles, you can see that the MJO goes into its final phases, and as a result, we have lots of downward forcing over Africa, lots of downward forcing, negative anomalies, or I should say, positive anomalies that indicate downward forcing right over top our traditional source regions for the beginning of January. But, I mean, we're getting there. If you come over to the CFS Weekly and you take a look at the 7-day averages as we get into June, there you go. This is the second week of June. And then to the third week and then into the fourth week, we start to see a lot more of that favorable setup because the MJO has repositioned itself right over the Indian Ocean, over the maritime continents, and we're going to start to see a little bit more of that upward velocity and so on and so forth. So if you're hoping for tropical activity, don't hold your breath. If you're preparing to attack a lot of us meteorological sources because there was no Alberto in the month of May, keep your shirt on because you have to be playing a very, very stringent game of lottery in order to get a tropical system. Last year and the years before that, we got lucky with frontal systems and less wind shear out over the Gulf of Mexico to create a little bit of a sloppy disturbance like Arlene last year. And, yeah. So June's going to be our month. We're slowly but surely trying to get there. Yeah, even the GEPS, as they go through into June, you can see we still have lots of just bad velocities, downward velocities out there over all of the Atlantic. You can see where our MJO is very, very enhanced, very excited out there in a very not good position technically towards the back end of its phasing. But as we rotate back around and we get that phasing to reorient itself over this general area, I'll even draw it in green so you guys get a better idea. I'll extend my ink. Here we go. Once we get that to move back here, that's when it could be game on. And it looks like since it's May 17th, we gotta give it a little while. It's the calm before the chaos. Let's appreciate it. Yeah, I believe that for sure. Oh, well, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and argue Scientology with my own religious faith. Obviously, I do believe that God has created our earth and created all the mechanisms within it, but that's not what this channel's about. I'm not going to sit here and tell the masses, God has formed a tropical cyclone and God believes this is the way it's going to go. No, we have church and we have other segments for that. Right now we're talking meteorology and science, so forgive me if I look over that. It's not me smothering my own faith. I go to church, my family and I worship, we give praise, we say our prayers, but at the same time we understand that there are certain platforms and modems, or what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, we'll just say that. There's certain platforms where you want to keep that in the mix, and I don't want to turn people off and think that's what I'm basing a lot of my material off of. But we'll see. Right now, our upper level dynamics are still not where they need to be. The planets have not aligned for all intents and purposes, metaphorically speaking. And as we all know, a lot of us at least, I'm still spinning myself up on it. Climatologically speaking, and in record keeping, when we go from a very strong El Nino and we're in transition, we usually see very calm conditions out there. It's not like things are going to start blasting like Danny DeVito immediately. We got to give it time. And truthfully, that could be going both directions. It could be a good thing because we're delaying the hurricane season. Could be a bad thing because all we're doing is letting things stew out there. As you saw with the OHC, the sea surface temperatures, we're just letting things build up. We're letting the atmosphere get its act together to align perfectly to where once things do kick off, I think we're going to be working overtime to stay ahead of them. Kevin Rivera, good morning. For some reason, my YouTube is not sending me a notification for live. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's been happening across the spectrum, because it's been a very low-key live stream today. There really haven't been very many people in there. How close are we? It's great to see you. Thank you very much for joining, albeit a little bit late. That's okay. Nothing really exciting to talk about here, truthfully. We're still waiting and seeing. We dispelled a little bit of the activity out there of the Caribbean. Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, maybe on the westernmost extent, we could see a little bit of flood activity or a bit of a flood threat begin to rise up as we move into next week with that upper tropospheric trough coming in. That's going to squeeze some moisture out of South America, all the garden variety thunderstorm activity they've been seeing out there. Maybe that's also what our models are thinking could help to pull our ITCZ moisture plume up a little bit and guide that into our Lesser Antilles and parts of the easternmost Greater Antilles. So we'll see. But in terms of tropical development, we're not there yet. Too much wind shear. Our vertical velocities out there are still pointed down. Our water is there, but that's about it. And that's the problem, is as our water continues to stew and boil up, once things above that begin to align and we allow for these waves to get moving and get going, that is where things could get a little problematic. And yes, I'm looking at you, rapid intensification, everyone's favorite terminology. But we're going to go ahead and end the live stream. I know we're a little early, and I'm going to try to be very quick in this outro. I am still soaking wet in sweat, to tell you the truth. I feel disgusting right now because I literally rushed in, built the thumbnail because I was at the gym, just doing my thing, and I realized, oh, shoot, it's Friday. I got to go do a live stream, so we're here. I'm going to go get cleaned up, get some protein in my system, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. We'll see you again probably on Monday. Monday, 9 a.m., same time, same place. Actually, where am I going to be on Monday? Because I'm off on Monday. Oh, and today I have my National Weather Service interview. So wish me luck on that. We'll see what comes with that. That's at 1 o'clock today. I'll definitely update you guys, whether it be in a short or on our live stream on Monday. To be determined, but fingers crossed. Definitely going into that. Humble, modest, and, faithful, and so on and so forth. So some things happening in the background still. And we will see you next time, guys. Yes, Storm 962, that's where I'm thinking. This season could definitely be quality over quantity. A lot of folks are focusing on the quantity, but I do think we're just naturally going to see more quality storms once things really start to get going into August, September, and October. There's a lot of variables out there that we're still trying to unfold and trying to unpack, but we will as time goes on, and right now it just doesn't seem like we're quite there yet. So, yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. Happy Friday. Definitely enjoy your rest of the day. Enjoy your weekend. Try to do what you can. Avoid the bad weather wherever it may be affecting. And if it's affecting your local area, whether you're in the Caribbean, the Bahamas, Central America, Mexico, the United States, wherever you're coming from, wherever you're tuning in from, just do your best to enjoy it for what it is and have a beautiful weekend. Be safe, everyone, and we'll talk to you again very soon. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it in the comments section down below. Or drop me a line on my Instagram, my X, or my TikTok, and I will definitely get back to you at my earliest convenience. But until next time, folks, you all know the drill. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.